St. John's 18, verse 37. Pilate therefore said unto him, Art thou a king then? Jesus answered, Thou sayest that I am a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness of the truth. Everyone that is of the truth heareth my voice. Now Jesus says, to this end was I born. So the word end is referring to a point that is being made. To this end was I born. Point made. Okay, this is an established fact that he's trying to get out into the world. To this end was I born. It's an established fact. This is my end. This is where it all boils down to. This is the purpose of my being. When he says, for this cause. He says, for this cause came I into the world. When Pilate had asked him, Art thou a king? He says, to this end was I born. And for this cause came I into the world. So Jesus is also making his point clear that he has come into the world, and this is the reason of his destiny, to prove to the world that he came into the world as a king. And not only that, but he is also known as royalty due to the fact of a royal bloodline, which also came from King David, from Joseph and Mary. He was a king. But God had a divine intervention and a plan to save man from their fallen nature and from the spiritual wickedness that so easily besets the simplicity of the carnal conscience of man and sin. So Jesus understood his reason, his cause, and he very knew the end of his coming here. Matthew 27:37 says, And sitting down they watched him there, and set up over his head an accusation written, The King of the Jews. An accusation written, this is Jesus, King of the Jews. Now what's an accusation? The accusation is pretty much stating that this is the crime that he committed. The accusation, this is what they accused him of. They accused him for claiming to be king of the Jews. And everybody else professing that this is the king of the Jews, or that he professed or they professed, got around. The accusation written upon his head of the crime committed and why he suffered was because he blasphemed.
You are a liar.
And so they writ upon his head that he's the king of the Jews. And so they put a crown of thorns on his head and mocked him. Now, although he was a child and he grew up and learned obedience by the things he suffered, and although he went to Gethsemane and he prayed to God, and he's still found on the cross, and we as humans are given a thorn in the flesh, being like a buffet before Satan, do what he wants with us. They crowned Jesus with thorns. And so they made a big mockery out of him, putting him right in the middle, in the center, with this thing on top of his head, and the sinners on his left and right side, so everybody can see what this man is and what his accusations was. He was king of the Jews. Now, when the wise men entered into Jerusalem, they made aware to the Pharisees and the king that there was one that was born in the town, king of Jews. Now, although all the scribes and inscribes know history, theology, they start watching. At 12 years old, he enters into the temple, and the doctors are astonished. They want to make a proselyte out of him. They ain't got surveillance cameras or drones or telephones, but I'm sure they kept a close witness on him. When Jesus was captured, the high priest Caiaphas also said, "Yet know nothing at all, but that one man should also take upon him that he would die, gather all in one, all the children." And so when the Caiaphas actually prophesied this prophecy, he also appointed Jesus to die that year for the people according to the prophecy of God. So Caiaphas himself also understood who he was. But according to custom, man had to kill the sheep and transfer the sin onto the sheep. And so they appointed him to die, and so he was crucified. And now our sins is also put upon Jesus. And now God washes us through the blood of the Lamb, and we are made white and clean through that custom. But of course, they were working by the law, and they wasn't working from the heart and by faith like his followers who loved him and cherished every moment they had with him. So although the application seems wrong, he died for our sins and he frees us from this death which he abolished. Okay, so they didn't have to make a mockery of him, but they did make a mockery, and that's wrong. And the things that they did. Matthew 27, verse 54. Now when the centurion and they that were with him watching Jesus saw the earthquake and those things that were done, they feared greatly, saying, "Truly, this was the Son of God." Okay, so now we have these centurions that are taking Jesus to the cross and nailing him into the cross. Now they have no idea on what is actually taking place. They only have what they heard about. And only after they see these things and the earth quaking is when they say, "Truly, this was the Son of God." So it was this centurion's decision, who was once faithless, who also now became faithful, to understanding him in himself that this was now known to him, that this is the Son of God. So one who was first unsure was now sure of something. Okay? He was guaranteed that it was the Son of God. He was amazed, and now he also himself had believed. On the inside of his thoughts, he became open-minded to the reality of what had just taken place and repented from what he used to believe. So a newcomer to Christ is one who repents and also wants to put his faith in what God is doing through Jesus and how God's grace can deliver them from their unworthy ways, and how the Spirit of Christ can lead us into obedience to God. This is what one must understand when they truly come to Christ and believe that he is the Son of God and that God is working great things through him. Hebrews 1:8. It was God who said unto his Son, Thy throne, O God, is forever and ever. A scepter of righteousness is the scepter of thy kingdom. So this scepter of righteousness was doing good, was being obedient to God, being loyal and faithful to God, being perfect in his way. This scepter of righteousness, being able to be sovereign and rule in this position. And the scepter of righteousness was the scepter of his kingdom. And this was his kingdom of righteousness. This was his kingdom that he would be perfect and be able to absolve all sinners through his blood and the purpose that God had come. So his kingdom was not of this world, being a literal heavenly kingdom, but spiritually the scepter of righteousness was his kingdom. And all those things, and though man also considered him born a king, being king of heaven, watching Lucifer fall from heaven, he entered into a royal bloodline, becoming king once again, never losing his deity and only resurrecting back on high again, never ever losing his rank. So it was Christ's kingdom of righteousness that reigned here on earth, which had nothing to do with war, bloodshed, or manpower, but the power of his righteousness as a humble, peaceful man.